All right, folks, we're back with another episode of the Movement Optimism Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Lehman. Today we have a special guest. We have Clifton Foe, who's a power lifter and a chiropractor out of Edmonton, Alberta. He'll soon be representing Canada and Lithuania at the 66 kilogram weight class. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Okay. I've known Clifton for a while, but we have him on because he has this clinical expertise as a chiropractor. He has wonderful experience, obviously, as a power lifter. But I know him from his more of his personal journey with dealing with injuries and concussions and the aches and pains that people have. So I really wanted to get him to share his story of recovery. Clifton, how you doing?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me on. It's crazy to have, go to school, read your research and what you're doing, and then all of a sudden going to see you as a patient, and then now being on your podcast. So it's a full journey.
Yeah, but you know what? We'll get into this. But it was funny seeing you as a patient because you were a good example of like when you work with healthcare providers, you knew the stuff. I don't know if I was like your therapist or just your coach, where I was looking at some of our old emails where I was just a sounding board, because sometimes it's hard to coach yourself. And so, but we'll get into that. So tell us a little bit about like your injury story, your pain story, and where it all started, and just what happened there, how it started.
Sure. So I started just getting into fitness and lifting at a pretty young age. Nothing in specific, but eventually when I went to university, I got involved with powerlifting. This was probably 2013 around there. And I was having a little bit of aches and pains here and there, nothing out of the ordinary like anyone else. It was probably not until I was prepping for Worlds in 2017, and that was in Belarus, where I started having like nagging pain in my back, my glutes, kind of a whole mix of things, it was like. And eventually I busted up my shoulder too during that prep. Um, and I kind of pushed through, just kept training. I had this joke where I did like an Advil cycle. I was like taking Advil just to kind of help cope with the pain to get through it. I was a young kid. I didn't know it better. I did see a lot of different healthcare professionals and anything from like, oh, it's just your glutes, or oh, it's your back. You got to strengthen it. You got to do Stu McGill's Big Three, for example. Um, Tried a lot of different things on that end, a lot of different modalities. Ended up just going in the competition, did pretty well. I actually won that year, which was nice to say the least. But then I decided to take a longer off season afterwards to, rest my body. Like I've had aches and pains before. This should just take some time. But the difference with that was it didn't actually get any better. It was still hurting a lot. And eventually, no matter what I tried, I was still having a lot of pain with it. But it was time to start up the season again. So went into 2018 nationals, very minimal dose. Like I was just maybe training 1 to 2 times a week, trying to maybe I won't do as much and such. But it was very painful sessions. Eventually I went through that and did all right. Didn't win, but I qualified for Worlds again that year. And that was 2018. After 2018 was when I went to Chiro school. So it was a very natural, like, you know what? Still a little beat up. I'm going to Chiro school. Why not just take some time and, heal my body? But it was a little bit rough in Chiro school because you're learning all this stuff and um, you're trying to like apply it to yourself, obviously, but you're still having the pain. And you're like, okay, well, this doesn't make any sense. You learn a class about like um, spinal stiffness and how it should be, somewhat rigid. And I remember my colleagues looking at my technique, and we found like a millimeter shift in my squat or in my deadlift, and we thought my technique was pretty good. But we're like, what if it's that
Yeah.
millimeter of shift? So I remember going in the gym, spending like 2 hours just hyper analyzing this little tilt I had, to obviously no avail, right?
What's your deadlift style?
So mostly sumo deadlift
Yeah.
was kind of what I did. Yeah.
So you're already pretty neutral-ish. I'm sure there's flexion, but you're like as upright and as straight as you can get, it seems.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we went through that. I obviously did more treatment, like got adjustments, a lot of different modalities, and just kept trying things. And I kind of take a few steps forward and then a few steps back, and I end up where I am. I'd work up to a certain weight, feel okay, and then one day it just kind of come crumbling down again, right?
Mhm.
So it was very tough process, and also because powerlifting was so involved in my life, like um, I coach people. It's why I went to school, dealing with injuries. It was a lot of my social life, and being far removed from that definitely influenced me a lot. Like it was a big part of my identity,
Yeah.
right? I couldn't and not being able to be part of that community again was very crushing, right? Sometimes you have conversations with people and they're like, oh, like what's going on? What happened to you? And I had this conversation with like one of the guys and who's actually at the top now. Like he's the best of the best in the weight class. But in 2016, 2017, we were just talking about like my injuries and like I was helping him out and stuff. And it was really tough. But fast forward a little bit, 2018, 2019, 2020 was just a lot of frustrating rehab, trying to figure things out, trying different things. Um, and then in 2020, at the height of COVID, I got in a car accident. And that's when I started having like concussion symptoms, like you mentioned earlier. It was like everything I was doing was re-aggravated. And I didn't think it was too serious. But as time went on, like pushing through pain is one thing, right? My back pain, my glute, but then not being able to lift anything. Like you touch the bar and you have a headache. You put
Yeah.
something on your back and you want to puke. It's not a good feeling. And it started getting to the point where I just didn't feel like doing it anymore, right? Like I didn't feel like I was capable of doing it. And that's kind of around the time where I saw you because I see your research, I see your literature, and I'm like, okay, this makes sense, but it's it's not working, right? Um, and I think one of the biggest things that you told me that really resonated with me was, oh, you don't have to do anything right now if you don't want to, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, it always felt like you had to do something. And maybe because I'm in Cairo school, because it was my community, because it was like, my sense of identity, I felt like I had this thing to accomplish. Like how how am I supposed to help patients when I can't help myself? And I think that is a testament to what you were saying about how healthcare professionals working with them is tough because like I knew the stuff I had to do. I
Yeah.
started learning about load management and such. Um, Even sometimes we'd go to some seminars and it'd be all about foot mechanics and then you'd switch gears. Oh, maybe it's like my foot
Yeah.
mechanics. But I started just getting to the point, I'm like, how much does this stuff even like matter? Like how much do I really have to zero in on this stuff? Um, but throughout the whole process of the motor vehicle accident, I ended up just taking like time off lifting altogether.
Yeah.
I just like I lost a lot of weight. I was definitely very, very skinny. I mean, I was living a frugal life in Toronto, going to Cairo school, so there's obviously a bunch of other life factors in addition to COVID and such. And slowly but surely, it just started coming back to, you know what, I kind of want to try this thing again. Like when I felt like doing it again, and I did. And I started very slow, right?
Yeah.
I didn't really care about technique, or not so much don't care about technique, but I didn't overly focus on it. Um,
Well, you
and
didn't have any places to go. Like
yeah,
you weren't, it wasn't so mechanical. It wasn't like, oh, here's your trigger. This is the thing that always aggravates you. It's lots of flexion. So let's do a more neutral. You didn't have that stuff. You had like classically very solid and there wasn't anything to symptom modify.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw all those other things as just potential symptom modifiers that I was just kind of tired of it. I'm like, look,
Yeah.
I'll just go, I'll just do something if I want to do it. And if I don't want to do it, I can do other stuff. Like there's more to life than just squat, bench, deadlift, right? And I think one of the shifts in mindset was more, instead of having some pain and feeling like, oh, something's wrong, something needs to be fixed, and find the one fix, it was just like, all right, well, just modify and keep going.
Or do
And I
something
think,
else.
yeah, and do something else. And doing something else was actually so valuable. Having another activity that you enjoyed, like I started getting more back into rock climbing, right?
Yeah.
And I started climbing a lot more. Not even just because it was a more tolerable activity for me to do, but it was just genuinely something I enjoyed more,
Yeah.
right? One thing I really took to heart was, and I use this with my patients all the time, like if if your pain isn't going to get any smaller, right? Well, what can you do? You can make your life bigger.
Yeah.
And by definition or default, the pain will seem smaller because you're doing way more. So I I just started doing that, just getting involved again. Like I'd still lift every now and then, to my tolerance of headaches or whatever it is. And if I didn't feel like lifting, I try something else. But I did a lot more climbing, and eventually I started just getting back into more lifting naturally because I wanted to. And I'm like, oh, maybe it went from a place of, I don't think I'll ever pick up a weight again, to I just want to do some activity and lift some weights when I can, to I think I want to compete again and see that, to, oh no, I want to PR again, to now like, no, I want to go to Worlds again.
Yeah.
um,
It's amazing.
yeah,
Have you, can I cut you out just for a second?
yeah, sure.
What you mentioned about making your life bigger. Have you heard the Tamara Pincus analogy on YouTube where she
No,
talks about
I
this?
don't believe I have.
So let's say you are like a big ball of yellow Play-Doh, okay? And then your pain is this tiny little blue ball, and you put that inside the yellow ball. Okay, initially, sometimes you can get lucky and you can just go in and cut out that pain, whatever reason, symptom modify, do something, and it's gone. But after a while, that blue little bit of Play-Doh starts to get mixed in with the yellow and mixed and mixed and mixed. And then over time, it's just this green blob, right? You can't separate the pain from who you are as the yellow. It's all over. And so it's like, well, what the hell do we fix? Because you can't go in there and fix that. And then so it's what you said is like you just start adding more yellow, right? And then that small little green blob is just on its own, but you just focus on the yellow and yeah, adding more in your life. That's sort of what I thought you're talking about there. So you can
Yeah,
send
no,
people
totally.
we'll find that. I'll send it to you. It's a nice thing to say where if you say something to your patients, what's great is someone else says the exact same thing. And then it really starts to resonate. So sorry, I just wanted to add that. I wasn't sure if you had
No,
seen
that's
that
that's
video.
a that's a perfect analogy, and I love using analogies with my patients, and I'm definitely gonna steal that one. So, um,
Yeah, because the thought with you, we probably talked about taking a rehab holiday. Because people like you who would like get really caught because you're successful and you've achieved a lot, you get caught up on like, I need to fix this, right? What's the right thing? Do I get this glute to fire? Is this right position? Like what's the thing that I have to fix? To do all these exercises. And sometimes it just gets in your way, right?
yeah, like I remember seeing multiple professionals where like I was like at a seminar, I was waiting to get my squat assessed because I heard that this guy like tears down your squat and builds it from the ground up. Or I went to see someone at a powerlifting meet that was just like sponsoring it, and they're like, oh, show me, oh, you do Sumiko's Big Free, like show me your bird dog. And I did it, and they're like, no, no, show me a real bird dog. And I was like rebuilding my bird
Mhm.
dog, right? Um, and I think a big shift in my training, instead of like, I still definitely, like, I'm an overthinker. I still definitely look at my technique and I try to like see if there's anything to change, but more from the perspective of, hey, like what can I do for performance or what feels better? Not so
Yeah.
much, hey, I need to do this because it's gonna, reduce my risk of injury. Like potentially it could, but it's not the main forefront or focus. It's I don't look at things as, um I don't pathologize or demonize things that I
Yeah.
feel anymore, like pain or anything like that. Obviously, and I tell my patients this, when you do have pain, you miss a lift, you don't feel good today, you have to skip out your run, like like it sucks, right? And I think it's always gonna suck. Uh, it's emotional, and I think it's okay to you know feel bad and kick, swear, do what you need to do. But then you kind of focus on, all right, well, what can I do now? Like, what can I focus on? And
Yeah.
with kind of the even now, like I'm prepping for worlds, I got ankle pain, I got back pain. I had to quit my last two deadlift sessions, right? And it still gets to me. I'm like, oh, because when we talk about building resilience in the body, I think over time, as you kind of get more reps in, you just have more experiences to draw from. Like, oh, I've battled this before, I can come back. But sometimes my mind still goes to, what if this is like 2017 Clifton prepping for Belarus again, and this is that glute pain that blows them up, or something like that. Like I can't help but have those thoughts, but
Totally.
I tend to back away a little bit. I find one of the biggest things we can have as athletes is the ability to zoom out and just look at a bigger timeline. Like, all right, like I still have 8, 9 weeks of prep left. Like, just take a bit of deload and see how the next 8 weeks go. If you have to go a little lighter, go a little lighter.
Yeah.
And with training, it's like I find the things that are tolerable and the ones that aren't. I'll focus on the things that are tolerable, but the things that aren't, I try to make them tolerable over time, right? Or it sees fit. I used to be really bad at conventional deadlift, and one of the things in my rehab was like, hey, I just want to get better at this because there's no reason why I can't adapt and get better at this.
Yeah.
And I did that for two reasons. One, to just kind of feel better about doing conventional deadlift. But two, I had the hypothesis of, like when I'm doing my sumo deadlift, which is traditionally very upright, if I were to kind of flex a little bit,
Yeah.
maybe I can control that more if I'm more used to flexing, right?
Yeah.
And just having more movement variance, like being able to do things differently, being able to adapt. Obviously, I try to get like the best of what I think is ideal for my type and my lift, but I like to give myself the ability to operate under different circumstances. If I step on the platform now and there's like a little bit of a divot and I'm not flat, I'd be like, okay, whatever. Like, let's
Yeah.
just do the lift. Um, at my last meet, like I had to coach the 2 days before, and I'm like, oh, maybe I won't be as recovered. I'm like, well, whatever. If I can do this and still lift, then great. And I did the best I ever had. And I find that not only does it help me build resilience in my own feeling of my body, but also just like if anything happens at Worlds, right? Let's say my flight's delayed, um, car doesn't really quite make it there, or there's not enough warm up stuff, or whatever it is, right? You're more ready for it, and I think that only happens if you allow yourself the ability to have that variance
Yeah.
versus like, hey, I always have to be like this.
Do
So
you do you see that when I hear you talking, like I'm not an expert in powerlifting and I haven't worked with a lot of powerlifters, certainly ones at your level, but I never think I need to be because I'm not going to be your coach. I'm not the person that's going to get the most out of your performance. You're the expert there. Right. And so when you're a therapist, I get to hear you say things like that. And I would say there's fundamentals in there where we would say, okay, you can't do this right now, but what can you do? How do we build you up to do the other things that you love? Do you need to back off and let that thing settle down? And like I work with a lot of runners and it's the exact same thing. If you have pain when you're running 10K on the asphalt, why don't you go do some runs on the trail? Why don't you decrease your pace? Why don't you increase your pace? Why don't instead of running 5 days a week, why don't you run 8 times where you split it up? Like I find it so interesting when you're talking because I like to hear like the fundamentals that so many people are doing, but we don't celebrate them enough. These little simple things. Like can I let me switch it for a second. Do you think I have no problem with McGill's big three and doing bird dogs? I actually think that they really have a role that always surprises people because I just think it's another way to stress the spine. It's another way to for people if they're really inactive to get active again, and it's a bridge to doing things they love. Do you do you ever prescribe them to people or use them at all? Not for yourself necessarily, but for the clients that you work with that might be in pain?
yeah, honestly, I see every movement as viable, right?
Yeah.
I really like to push the dosage analogy to my patients. Like, I don't really care what you do, but I want you to do something,
Yeah,
something that's active. And I just want it to be at the appropriate dosage. Like if you take too much medication, you might have some side effects. If you don't take enough, you're not going to adapt. You kind of want that sweet spot. So
beauty.
you get some adaptations, right? And I really try to I always say there's many roads to Rome, right? I am a powerlifter. Obviously, I have a bias to squat, bench, deadlift.
Yeah,
So if patients come in, if you're gonna give me the reins, I'm gonna try to teach you how to squat and deadlift, like a squat and a
sure.
hinge, which I think is great. But I also say, hey, if you don't want to do that, like let me know. We can do other stuff. And I tell them that, one of the reasons why I want you to do some activity, especially if you're not doing any, is because there's just proven benefits to it. Sure,
Perfect.
I'm still trying to look, I think this can help with your issue, whether I'm looking at it from a biomechanical lens or whether I'm looking at it from this that mentally, I think it'll just be good for you to explore something to help with your own pain experience and just be active again. But also just if you do this stuff, like you're gonna be better off than if you don't.
Yeah,
And I try to be flexible, right? Like even with what you told me, and I'm like, if I have this guy now where he's not really comfortable with it, I'm like, okay, that's okay. You're comfortable with upper body. Let's just do upper body for now until you start feeling like you kind of want to dip your toes in there a little bit and give it a
yeah,
shot. So yeah, I mean, I say
great.
Stu McGill's big three probably just because a lot of people like know what those are. But I mean, you could even just say like the big 1,000 exercises that
Yeah,
I've tried. And nowadays, like for myself, the past few days since I've been dealing with some glute pain again, I've been doing a lot of different mobility strength type of exercise, but I'm just kind of like making it up as I go too. I'm like, oh, this
sure.
kind of feels good. I'm gonna do it a little bit.
Yeah.
And my intent is maybe I'll get a little bit of symptom relief, and maybe I'll just feel better by my next session, right? Um,
Do you ever think, say your glutes, you kind of think with your rehab, okay, like so I've done lots of this, like what am I missing? What do these glutes not get? Like do they get trained at this shortened position or this lengthened position, or they get trained like rapidly, or get trained really heavy where they're isolated, or yeah, that's always my cheat with rehab. I'm like, okay, well, what haven't we done? Well, let's do that. Or the old, what do you suck at doing? Then let's do that.
Yeah, I tend to like to start where you haven't been before. But one of the things too is I do go down that rabbit hole sometimes, and especially when you see other coaches, right? A lot more metrics, analytics with what they do.
Yeah,
I tend to have adopted a very much more pragmatic approach when it comes to things. Like I'll go down those rabbit holes, but then I'll reel myself back and be like, okay, well, what do we know for sure? What can we focus on, right? What can I do now to make the best change that I can? Um, Sometimes I remind myself maybe I'm being like too pragmatic. Like you still need some direction. You can't
yeah,
just be like, oh yeah, just do whatever you want then, and
I
you're
know.
good. No, like
I hear you.
especially if and that's I think that's where I try to like back off. But when it comes to the lifting world, number one thing is still, all right, how's my programming? How's my recovery? Pull back, whoops, pull back, do some stuff like that. Before kind of instead of like I gotta hit the foam roller for 2 hours or
Right.
3 hours to do this, right? So
And how do you weave like psychosocial factors into your rehab or your thoughts on yourself or people you work with?
definitely having a good support network. I definitely struggle with that a lot. And I think even for like the accident when I had like hearing sensitivities, I didn't want to talk to anyone.
No.
It hurt my head. I couldn't play the piano for years and it was tough. But just acknowledging that the body's more than just muscles and bones, right? Your stress, your sleep, your nutrition, all that can play a role. So kind of having that ability to zoom out and recognize there's more factors at play. If you can like hone in on the factors that you think will help make a difference, but I think just having that ability to realize that it's more than just what you're doing at the gym gives you some perspective and allows you to just be a little bit more okay with it, and having the adjusting your expectation that yeah you're not gonna have a good session all the time. um sometimes when I remember coaching this one guy and he said, "Oh, it feels heavy today, like in competition, right?" He's like, "Oh, it doesn't feel good." And I'm like, "Hey man, this is powerlifting. Like it's supposed to feel heavy. It's supposed to be hard. Like it's not we if this stuff was easy, everyone would do it, right?"
Yeah.
And shifting that, like I don't like to say, "Oh, you're bound to get injured," right? But like statistics wise, you're probably going to have some aches and pains
Yeah.
now and then, right? And I find teaching, especially patients, how to manage them and not just how to like that expectation that, look, you have some back pain, you might have this again throughout your training. Here's some stuff you can try before you kind of sound all the alarms. Like, and one of the lowest hanging fruits to try is just give it a few days. Like
Yeah.
give it a few days before go into the pit of despair and, oh, I'm gonna drop out of my competition. I can't make it to Lithuania. I missed 2 deadlift sessions. Like it those thoughts come to me too. Like
Yeah.
I'm not I'm not immune from this stuff. I think you just kind of get better at handling it, dissecting it, right?
No, I think it's a massively valuable message for people to know that having some pain, not only is it okay, but it's expected. And I honestly think it's weird not to have some pain when you're pushing yourself or training, right? I just don't think people know that. And I think there's a subset of people who have pain and they catastrophize and they ruminate and they get caught up on fixing themselves, and it just leads to this cycle of more worry because that's all you can think about. Like it's such I'm so happy to hear that 'cause it's such a good message. And I've seen your Instagram over the past year, and I know you're writing that. I'm like, yeah, we gotta promote this.
Yeah. I feel like a broken record sometimes, but
It's
it's it's
okay.
it's it's yeah. I mean,
No, every clinicians think, oh, I keep saying the same analogies or the same things to people. I'm like, it's all right. You don't need to go take another Lorimer Mosley course. You can read a 10-page pamphlet that has good messaging on pain, and then you can repeat that for 10 years. You don't need to go hardcore into all this stuff. You know what you're doing? I don't know if you know this, like with when you're talking about giving exercise to your patients, that's the treatment buffet hypothesis. You just lay out everything on the table of what your parameters are. Like, here, we want to do this. We want to stress your back. We want to stress your hips. We want to do some stuff. We're not this too much. So here's all the options that you get to do. What do you want to do with me? And you can always say, oh, let's do deadlifts, but you can also get to say to them, well, these are the things that we can do. Did you know that? Have you heard that the
yeah,
treatment
yeah,
buffet?
yeah. I definitely have heard of it. It's funny because I've seen a lot of different people that have been in a lot of chronic pain. Especially when I first graduated, I'd have friends send me their mom, friends send me their dad, that they always have the shoulder thing, right? Or they always have this hip thing. And um, from a business perspective, it's not that great because I'll usually have a session and that's it.
Yeah.
Because I'll have the session and really you're just chatting with them, kind of dissecting everything and helping them understand themselves that, it's just, look, like, I don't think anything is wrong with the shoulder per se. Sure, you have some, I think framing it as sensitivities has helped a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things I look for a lot, even in my own training, is what I like to call disconnects. It's when, let's say you have some glute pain and you can't deadlift, it hurts, but you can squat. The squat uses the glutes just as much as the deadlift, if not more. So then I see that as more, hey, like that's a disconnect. That means you probably don't have anything super serious. Obviously, go see a healthcare professional if you need to rule out red flags and such.
Yeah.
But that makes me more confident that, yeah, this is just a little bit of a sensitivity to this lift, especially if you can handle it at a reduced load or a reduced range or a different stance or something like that. Then you can hang your head on, like, yeah, just do something a little bit different for now and let time do its thing and then slowly go back to that.
Yeah.
Versus if you had like, I always say, if you had a broken arm, like, you have a broken arm, we're not gonna change all of a sudden the other arm is broken instead of this one. Like, it's an acute injury. It's very different, right? So
No, no, I love it. I call that confronting people with their strengths. Like instead of doing an assessment where you just find all the bad things, do an assessment and find all the things that they can do, and we're like, we're gonna double down on those, and that gives you the halo. It'll those things, if you can squat well, that'll carry over and help the deadlift. It'll just take time. We just have to settle it down. It's why I do like. I wonder if so much. I do. I think it was McGill that said the virtual surgery that he does with people, like pretend that you had back surgery. So you just completely shut it down, hardly do anything, and then slowly build up over time. Like I love that idea, or the idea of like these things help people, but maybe they're like the bird dogs and all that stuff. But maybe it has nothing to do with increasing stiffness and spine stability, but it's just a new stress that doesn't feel good, and people have some control, and then it gives them permission to take some time off, and then slowly over time they start doing the other things that they love. But, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I try not to sound too zen when I'm like talking about stuff like that, but it really is just putting yourself on that path to recovery, right?
Yeah,
Putting yourself on that path to experience things again in a positive, or at the very least neutral aspect, to experience some movement activity that is not negative and not painful and can kind of, I think Lauren Mosley talks about the cycle of pain a lot, right? To not be in that cycle is liberating for a lot of people. um, we deal with pain and aches and stuff like that all the time, but I think there's a pivotal like defining moment for every different person, which is different, that you're worried about, right? There's probably something about this pain experience that you have that makes you want to come see people like you or I, right? um and I think having that pivotal moment is probably, for me, it's when you can't do something you love to do anymore, right? When you can't do an activity that you want to do. So that's kind of how I like to frame things, like what can't you do, or what are you having difficulties doing, and how do we get you back
yeah,
there
that
as the
that's it.
forefront of the conversation, because you're working with people. You're not just working with, obviously anatomy matters, and this is where I'd be like, don't be too pragmatic, because like sometimes some people can come in and they have a very anatomical, pathological, like neurological condition, for
Yeah,
example. Someone could literally walk in with MS or cancer, and like we have to look at those things first and rule it out. But most of the time, when all that is gone, I'm gonna go back to, hey, what do you want to do? Like,
yeah,
what are you here for? And like, also, dude, you don't have to be here. I've had a lot of people come in, and I'm like, look, if you feel fine, like you don't have to come in for anything. I mean, if I'm a chiropractor, if you want to try an adjustment, like I can give you an adjustment. And I definitely have changed my tune a little bit on modalities like that. If people want it and it's under the right narrative,
sure.
I'm okay to provide the service. I will still always give you what is kind of more high value care per se. But yeah, I don't I try not to I try I've took a page out of your book, and I'm trying to be a bit more kind of neutral with
Yeah,
things,
yeah, yeah.
and not like, hey, oh, never
Uh,
stretch or never do this. I'm like, no, that's okay. Like we could maybe spend our time doing this. But asking those deeper questions, like why do you want this? Why do you want to stretch? Why do you want to get an adjustment? Why do you want needling? Like, what's
yeah.
the intended purpose here? Um, so I used to joke around that, like, if uh if you want a beer, like that's okay. If you feel like you need a beer, then we might have a conversation that, you might be an alcoholic and there might be some intervention there, right?
True, true. Okay. Listen, we're gonna wrap up. Tell everyone where they can find you. I'll link to
Yeah,
stuff too.
sure. So nowadays, I think Instagram is probably the most updated thing. So Clifton underscore foe is my Instagram handle. So message me anytime. Otherwise, they can email me cliftonfoe@gmail.com, or visit my website www.lifton.ca. Um, but yeah,
And
those are probably the
you
best
do
things.
online coaching?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm an online powerlifting coach. Also do some like one-on-ones as well, and then
Yeah,
I also work part-time as a chiropractor. Those worlds kind of get blurred together.
sure.
So honestly, it really comes down to like, do you have health benefits? Okay, come see me as a chiro. If you don't, like, save your money, pay the lower rates, see me as a coach.
Okay.
Right.
And do you see patients online as well?
Yeah,
Okay,
sometimes.
good, good.
Generally the odd power lifter. We'll have conversations, kind of like what we're having now. So
No,
it's a good thing.
I think you'll help a ton of people, and I really appreciate you coming on.
No, thanks for having me, and thanks for everything that you do. It's
Okay.
helped my practice a lot and has helped a lot of my patients too. So
Oh, good. Yeah, yeah. Go on. All right, folks. That's it for Movement Optimism. See you next time. Thank you.